There's something peaceful about the water, isn't there? Sometimes we get stressed out and anxiety comes our way. Sometimes it just does our soul good to sit by the water, whether it's a pond or a stream or the ocean. Sometimes the water's peaceful and calm. What about other times? What about the times where things are okay and they're calm and they're peaceful and life's great, and then bam, it's like somebody threw a rock right in the middle of your life, and now that calm, peaceful feeling is way gone, and it's replaced by ripples or waves or a storm. Maybe you feel like you're in the middle of a storm right now. What if I told you that sometimes it takes a storm to bring the calm? There's a story like that in the Bible. It's in Mark chapter 4, verse 35. In fact, it's in Matthew, Mark, and Luke. But in Mark 4:35, Jesus has been teaching all day and he's tired. And he looks at the disciples and then some of the crowd around. And in verse 35, Jesus said, let's get in a boat and let's go across to the other side. They're around the Sea of Galilee. Jesus said, let's get in the boat, let's go across to the other side and see what happens. So the crowd and the disciples get in their boat and they head across the Sea of Galilee, and everything's calm and peaceful when they start. But they get out on the sea and this windstorm comes in. And it's no ordinary storm. In fact, in the book of Matthew, the word Matthew uses for storm is translated as seismos. If you're from California, you're familiar with the term seismos, an event of seismic proportions. Matthew said the storm was like an earthquake on the sea. The boat began to rock and shake. The sea just came alive. And the Bible says they're in danger on the boat. The waves are crashing over the boat. The boat's getting swamped. And people are starting to panic. Now, these aren't just land-loving scallywags with no sea legs. Some of these folks are professional fishermen. We know that Peter and Andrew and James and John, they're on one of the boats. And before they met Jesus, they fished for a living on the Sea of Galilee. And they're freaking out. That tells you this is no ordinary storm. The water's rising in the boat. People are panicking. Now stop right there. Who's the one who told the disciples to get in the boat? It was Jesus. In verse 35, it didn't say Peter or James or Andrew or John said, hey, let's go for a boat ride. Jesus said, let's get in the boat and let's go for a ride. Now, can you imagine at that moment as the storm, the windstorm's picking up and waves are crashing into the boat and the sea is on fire? There's an earthquake in the sea, and those professional sailors, those professional fishermen say, we're gonna die. Can you imagine the thought that went through their mind? If only we had stayed on shore. There were plenty of people on shore that didn't get in a boat. They went back home. The Bible's very clear that there was a large crowd and then there was a smaller crowd. There were lots of people on that shore that said, nah, you go on this one, Jesus. I'll catch you next time. And they went home. Now, can you imagine being one of those people who got in the boat with Jesus only to suddenly see your life in danger? The thoughts that must be running through their mind. If only I had stayed on shore. Maybe you've been there. Maybe you've gone the wrong direction in your car when you had the choice of two directions to take, and now you ended up almost out of gas and lost, and you say, if only I had went the other way. Well, these guys' lives were in danger. And they're saying, if only I had stayed on shore. Because let's be real, it was late in the evening. Those people on shore, they were fine. It was a windstorm on the sea. There wasn't a hurricane on the land. Some of those people who stayed on shore, they were around the supper table with their families, enjoying a good time. They were around the supper table and they were saying, man, Jesus preached a great sermon today, didn't he? We'll have to catch him when he's back in town. They were around the supper table and they were warm and they were dry and they were safe. Their boats were safe. Their boats, their vessels were tied safely in the docks. Their sails were intact. Financially, they were seeing no harm. Not so with the people on the water. Their boats were getting rocked. Their sails were getting ripped. They were wet and they were scared. The people on the shore, they were fine. And their prospects for tomorrow looked pretty good. The people on the boat were scared out of their minds and they were wet and their prospects for tomorrow looked pretty bleak. So they're freaking out, they're scared out of their minds, they're wet, they're being swamped, their boats are sinking, they're about to drown, and somebody says, we should wake up Jesus. So they go and they wake up Jesus and they say, hey, don't you care that we're about to drown? Because, oh yeah, during the middle of this storm, Jesus was asleep on the boat. He was on a cushion, nice and comfy, and the storm didn't bother him at all. So they woke up Jesus, they said, we're about to drown, and Jesus got up and he wiped the sleep from his eyes and he looked at the sea and the wind and the waves. He looked at his creation and he said, hush, be still. And it was so. The waves ceased and there was an immediate calm on the sea. Here's the thing. The people on shore were safe and they were dry. But they had no idea that God was walking around them. The people on the boat who followed Jesus, they were wet, they were scared, they were losing their minds. But when they saw Jesus stand up, they suddenly realized God is in our boat. So those folks could have stayed on the shore and been safe and dry and comfortable for the remainder of their days. But they never would have seen Jesus. The folks on the boat needed the storm in order to see who Jesus was. Now listen, I don't want to pretend that's easy. 'Cause that's tough. I don't want to pretend I know what storm you're going through. Because I don't. God does. But I don't. But I can tell you that sometimes it takes a storm to see God. And if it takes a storm in my life to see Jesus and to know that calm and that peace in the middle of the storm, I'm not saying to know God means the storms will end. In fact, this story tells us just the opposite. Sometimes knowing Jesus means he's going to send you into the middle of a storm. But if the result of that storm is to see Jesus more clearly than you've ever seen him before, to know him in a deeper way than you've ever known him before, well, that's what brings the peace to your heart that allows you to go through the storm. If you're going through a storm right now, man, I want to pray with you. There's other believers who want to pray with you and lift you up. But hear me. If you cling to Jesus and say, Jesus, I'm dying here, you'll see a God who cares for you and who wants you to know him so that you can have peace.